What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and welcome back to Geek Culture Explained. And in the most recent episode of She-Hulk, basically as usual, nothing happened, but we did get the introduction of Mr. Immortal, so that's cool. So here's the question we're going to answer in this video. Who is Mr. Immortal? Because I imagine a lot of you all are probably wondering that. So as you can figure out from the TV show, Mr. Immortal is a guy named Craig Hollis. But what's the deal behind this guy, and what are they going to do with him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, for the quick and dirty origin here, Craig Hollis is quite literally a guy who can't die. And in truth, it's really more of a healing factor, as well as kind of death and resurrection to a degree, kind of depending on who's telling the story, but the important thing is he can't die. So let's refer to the comics here for a second. So in Marvel Comics, when you die, you go to different places depending on what you did during your life. So if you made a bargain with Mephisto, for example, you go to his realm when you die. But if you're just anybody who was walking down the street and just kind of lived a regular life and you were hit by a car and died, you go to the realm of Mistress Death. But how do you get there? Okay, so in Marvel Comics, there's a being called the Death Urge. And the Death Urge is, by all standards of measurement, what you or I would refer to as the Grim Reaper, the person that appears and whisks you away to whatever afterlife you're supposed to be going to. In this instance, when it came to Craig Hollis, his mother died during childbirth, and that's when he was first introduced to the concept of death as well as the Death Urge, because the Death Urge ended up taking his mother away. Now, in the early days of his stories, we didn't really know what the relationship was between Death Urge and Craig. We didn't know if Death Urge was keeping Craig safe from death, or if Craig was simply unable to die, and the Death Urge was putting him in circumstances trying to kill him to take him to the realm of death, or wherever it is that he was supposed to go. We know this because over the course of the time that they spent together, Death Urge would do things like have Craig play patty cake in the middle of the street with oncoming traffic as like a toddler, or he would have him sit in a tree during a lightning storm, different things along those lines, right? But what ended up happening is there came a point when Death Urge actually had Craig playing with matches in the basement of his house, and that it really would have led to the death of pretty much anybody under that circumstance. And while it did kill Craig's father, Craig himself survived. And so Craig's father was whisked away by the Death Urge, and then Craig himself was taken to a foster home. Now, one of those things that happened there is the Death Urge kind of lingered around there, and it looked like one of those circumstances where because Craig was just constantly abused by his father, that Death Urge was potentially manipulating that. We're not entirely sure. But during this time, Craig fell in love with a girl named Terry, and the two of them basically ended up going off into the world and doing their own thing. But there came a point when Terry just couldn't handle it anymore because of all the experiences she'd had over the course of her life, the abuse at the hands of her father and so on and so forth. She had what seemed to basically be PTSD, left a suicide note for Craig, and took her own life. The belief of Craig is that the Death Urge goaded her into doing it. So Craig basically told Death Urge, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore, go away, and effectively cast him off. So any belief that we had that Death Urge was keeping Craig safe from death was immediately eliminated, because following the death of Terry and the absence of Death Urge, that Craig kept trying to take his own life. He blew himself up with TNT, he tried to drown himself. This guy quite literally even went so far as to jump off of a building and just splatter on the ground below, but he ended up just standing up and basically healing, and that was essentially it. But the important thing here is under no circumstance can he die, and in fact, even in the newer Immortal Hulk stories, he's the last surviving thing in the universe. Right? Like literally everything else is dead. Planets, stars, cosmic entities, sentient life, the whole nine yards. He's just the last thing there, which is really kind of a wild situation. But the other question to ask is, with that being the case, what are they going to do with him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, as I see it, there's really only two options. The first one is he's just a simple cameo in this episode of She-Hulk, and we never see or hear from him again, which is the most likely circumstance. The second possibility is they put him on the Great Lakes Avengers. So for those guys who don't know, in Marvel Comics, you got all kinds of Avengers teams. You have the original Avengers team, and then the original Avengers team launched the West Coast division, so you had Avengers West Coast. The original Avengers team and the West Coast Avengers eventually disbanded, and then we got the New Avengers, then we got the Mighty Avengers, and then we got the Young Avengers, and so on and so forth. You had all kinds of teams out there. The Great Lakes Avengers, they were like the cast-offs. If you could take everything that makes Deadpool comedic, right, being goofy and silly and his stories being just nonsensical, and you could take that concept, and turn it into a comic book superhero team, it'd be the Great Lakes Avengers. They're basically cast-offs, right? Like, people out there who are watching this and looking for a reason to be upset, here's one for you. There's a chick on that team named Big Bertha, who's basically a supermodel, that if she eats a ton of food, she gets super fat, and that's where she gets her powers, like enhanced durability and strength and all that kind of stuff. So those of you guys looking to be mad, there you go. But the thing about this is that when it comes to that team, they're goofy, they're nonsensical. There's nothing about them that you would take serious. And when you look at the character of Craig, both in the comics and even in the show, they're very similar in that way. There's huge age differences. In the comics, Craig's like 22. In the show, it looks like he's in his late 40s, maybe early 50s. But the thing about this, and really what's important here, is that neither of them are serious characters. So if they were going to do something with him in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they would likely roll him on to the Great Lakes Avengers team as what's probably a comedic TV show. Again, I don't know if they're going to do that. I stick by the idea this guy's a one-off cameo. We're never really going to see anything with him again, but there you go. That should give you guys a good understanding of who Mr. Immortal is. He's quite literally a guy that just can't die. But with that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace. 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 Peace.